So by now, we already explore how you convert, why you need to use R formula, when you use R formula, and after you successfully converted the R formula, what are the two types of questions that they will ask you. So now this example is an extension of example 4. It's a harder version of example 4. So if you take a look at the first part of this question, you are going to express a function into R formula. So that one I'm not going to go through. I take it as you should be able to convert it successfully by now. So now the second part is the maximum and minimum. So the maximum and minimum is the same idea as example 4, except that we got a extended function. So the extended function is in the square function as in the cube function. Okay, so let's run through first. So the first part is the conversion of the R formula. The second part, okay, for part A, you are asked to find the maximum and minimum value and the corresponding value. So that is exactly like example 4. So as a quick recap, so if you already converted, it is the conversion. It is a converted single function that decide. So this converted function is between 1 and -1. So you multiply by 13. So you get your R formula. And your R formula is a representation of the original function. So this will be the maximum value. This will be the minimum value. So if you want to find the corresponding x, you are going to set this to 13. So for the maximum value, you set the function to 13. And then you do the typical set. Use your converted form. And you divide by 13. Then you do your 4 steps. Same thing as example 4. So that now I'm just doing a recap. So minimum value. So minimum value, you just set the function to the minimum value. Okay, and you repeat. So this is the most basic maximum and minimum they will ask you. So they will ask you on this. Okay, they will ask you on the converted R formula function. Okay, so this is the basic one. The difficult one is where they decide to square the function. So if you look at part B, they decide to square the function. So the squaring is the one that tricks student. Okay, so let's explore the squaring. Okay, the squaring is a bit difficult to understand for some of you. Okay, so I will take it from this portion. So we already know that -13 and 13 is the maximum and minimum. So what happened when I square it? Okay, so if I decide to square it, that means I decide to square it. I should get a 13 square. So if I decide to square it, I should get a 13 square. But the other side, I'm not going to get a negative 13 square. I will get a 0. So in a while, I explain why will you get a 0 first. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the correct answer first, then I explain. So in this case, this is my maximum. And this is the minimum. The minimum is 0, the maximum is 169. If you would like to find the corresponding value, you let the whole function equal to 169. So the maximum is 169. You let the function be 169. And then you do very logically. You take a square root. But taking square root will give you two answers. That means, right, if you use the converted cosine R formula, you will also have two sets of answers. So you just work out accordingly. For the minimum value is 0. So you set the function to 0. So when you set the function to 0, and when you decide to take a square root, okay, it makes no difference. Square root 0 is still a 0. So remember from the first part, I don't need to use my R formula. If it's equal to 0, I can simply get my tangent. I don't need my R formula. Okay, running out of space. So I don't need my R formula for the single function. I just have to do my tangent, and then I can do a single function, and then I can do my 4 steps to find the corresponding x. So this is the correct way. Okay, but the confusing part is why is it a 0? So that is the question, that is the thing that a lot of people cannot understand. So I'm going to illustrate using the numerical value. So when we say this function is between minus 13 to 13, do you know that it means that? So it means that, right, this can be minus 13, minus 12, minus 11, minus 10, minus 9. Okay, there's just too many numbers. So it can be, these are the numbers. So when you say that this function is between the minus 13 and 13, that means it can stretch all the way from minus 13, minus 12, minus 11. So all these are the possible values that you can square. So these are all the possible values that you can square. Okay, so we are going to explore the squaring. So I'm going to square all these numbers. And after I square this number, right, I like to check what's the highest after I square, what's the lowest after I square. So if I square this, I will get 169. If I square this, I will get 144. If I square this, I'll get 121. So you can keep on squaring. You keep on squaring. Okay, here is also 1. You keep on squaring. You keep squaring. Okay, I'm skipping a few numbers. So if you keep on squaring and you check after the squaring, if you check after the squaring, you realize that the highest is 169. Even though you repeat twice, doesn't matter, that's the highest. And the lowest is actually 0. You realize that after squaring, you do not have any more negative numbers, because any negative number after squaring would have become positive. So you look at the possible numbers that you can actually square. and you really go and square every one of the possible number, after the squaring, you realize that the highest is 169, the lowest is a 0. It fits the idea that anything square will be positive. A squared function will always be positive. So that is the part that a lot of people will find confusing, or they wouldn't even think of 0. Okay, so that is a square function. And this one recently appeared in I think one of the recent exam. I think it's 2020 O-level question. So do take note of the squaring function. It's very important, okay, because it recently just appeared. Okay, so if you think about the squaring, then what about the cube function? So what about the cube function? So what do you think? So if I don't cube the function, okay, the highest is minus 13, the lowest is 13. So you can do it in the same understanding as the squaring function. So you take all the possible values. You take all the possible values. So take all the possible values and you try to cube it. You see what happens. So you cube this number, negative 13. If you cube it, you will get negative 2197. So this one, you go and cube it, you will get negative 1728. So go and cube every number. Okay, you can see that you still get a negative number. So you go and cube. So take all the possible number and you try to cube it. So go and cube all the possible numbers. So you realize that you still have some negative numbers. So you look at what are the values after cube. So you realize that the maximum will be 2197. The minimum will be minus 2197. Okay, so that is the maximum for the cube. This is the minimum for the cube function. So if you would like to find the corresponding values of x, you set the whole cube function to 2197. Take your cube root. Taking cube root wouldn't give you two possible answers. So you only got 13. Then you use the converted R formula to continue to solve. So the same thing for the minimum value. You set the whole function to the minimum value. But if you do that, taking a cube root also gave you only one answer. So again, you use your converted R formula and you continue. So it seems like for the cube function, nothing spectacular. It seems like you are just going to cube both numbers. So the only tricky one is the one with the squaring. So after I square, right, my minimum value is actually a 0. So that one you got to understand how it comes about. You take all the possible values and you go for the squaring. After the squaring, you realize that 0 is the lowest. and the highest is 169. For part A, there is a basic one that you must know. Okay, so that one is the extension for maximum and minimum value.